So yeah, after getting the 2 coats of fiberglass on, did a bunch of sanding using 80 grit, 60 grit, followed up by some 80 grit. Just went back over it here with some 2-part epoxy fairing compound from Total Boat. It's called Total Fair. Just mix up yellow and blue, make green, and I'm just going around and hitting some of the larger areas that need to be blended in a little bit better. Once I got that on there, sanded it down with 80 grit, just get it kind of fine. Next thing I'm doing is adding some primer to the whole camper. I'm using Total Boat's Topside Primer, I believe it's called. And I'm mixing this up with a 10% mixture of brushing thinner. You can then put it on with a roller, and I did this both for the primer as well as for the top coats of paint. So once mixing it up, adding in a little bit of thinner to it, and once you get a good consistency, I heard somewhere, or I saw it on YouTube, something about doing a 5-second drip. So once the primer was in and then the brushing thinner was put in on top of it, when you mix it up and you go to pull the stick up and out, you'll get the running, drip of paint until it starts dripping. And so when it's actually flowing down and then it starts to drip, it should be about a 5 seconds or so in there, and you should be pretty close to having the right consistency. After that, it's just a case of rolling it all on. Using the roller method, you just used very, very, very light coats. Of course, with the brushing thinner on there, it also dries very quickly. Now, I'm also doing this in the middle of summertime, so it was drying quicker than I really wanted it to or anticipated it to, but it went on pretty smooth. And I wound up doing 2 coats of primer. So in between the coats, I would go back and sand it with 120 grit on this first coat of primer that I put on. And of course, went back in between the 2 primer coats with some more of the Total Fair, and just went around, made sure that I got rid of any small pinholes or any imperfections that were brought up by the gray primer. So one of the good things about using a gray primer, even though I wound up using a white top coat, is that the gray primer tends to show more issues of where you may have problems, either not being flat enough, or little dings or gouges or whatever that you may not have noticed when you're putting on the fiberglass. So yeah, gray primer, I would definitely recommend it. Again, it just helps you see all the imperfections where you have to go back in and Bondo or use some sort of an epoxy in order to smooth it out and level it up. So that actually worked really, really well. Again, put the first coat down, sanded it, went back, filled in any gaps, places that I had with the Total Fair, sanded it with 80 grit again, and then did a 100 grit over the top of that before adding on the second coat of primer. This actually coats rather well, and again, it's a thin coat. On this, I'm using a mohair roller. I believe it's an eighth of an inch nap, I believe is what it was. It's just very, very fine roller specifically for this. Now, Total Boat does also sell a foam roller, which I tried one of them when I was doing the top white coat, and honestly, I didn't care for it. So I would definitely suggest the mohair rollers. You tape them off before you start using them. It gets any little bit of fuzz that may be on there. I did not have any problems whatsoever with getting any kind of hair or anything onto the paint job. So it actually came out rather well. And once the primer was finished, I did a final sand with 120. and wiped it down with a dewaxer and got ready to start adding on the top white paint.